Welcome back to the channel. So this time it's something a little bit different that we haven't done so far, and we're going to start leaning into this now. One of the main Soviet battle tanks, and that is the T34. And this one specifically is the T34-85, which is the one with the larger gun, bigger turret, used towards the later part of the war. So I think it's 44 into 45, and most notorious for rolling into the streets of Berlin, among other things, and then, used all the way through the Cold War and a long way into nearly modern times. So it's a very interesting tank, a very long-lived tank, and a pretty good tank. So it's got a pretty good gun, pretty good armour, and a bit of a war winner on the Soviet side. It's the Soviet version of the Sherman, and did a very good job. So, what kit we've chosen here to use, and I thought I was being not clever, but I thought it was a good choice, is using this Airfix kit, which is the Academy rebox, and this is reboxing their version of the 112 Factory production. There's just a few. The Soviet tanks were built in different factories, so because of that, there's slight differences between the same tank. So it's a T34-85, but the 112 production has a few slight differences, mainly on the turret, the way the turret's shaped and cast, and a few things like that. One thing to say about this, I know we're rattling on through the build as I'm talking, and you can see it's a multi-part lower hull we're doing here, and it actually goes together quite well. And you can just see here, I'm sanding off, showing you just some of the rough cast texture that's moulded in, and I'm getting rid of that. Think long and hard if you want to buy this kit, because this video is really a representation of how a kit can cause you trouble, turn into something you don't really want, and be a bit of a pain going all the way through. This is not a great kit for a number of reasons, but the main one being that there's just such a great alternative out there now, which is the Ryefield Models kit, and it's about £10 more than what I paid for this. The Ryefield Model kit is between £35 and £40 in the UK, and it is worth every penny, and I would not be able to advise this Academy kit over that Ryefield Model kit. So in the future we may return to this subject with the Ryefield Model kit, but by all means I would advise that one, so that's something you want to look for. So the problems with this kit is based around a bit of clunky engineering, a bit of poor quality control from Airfix in the reboxing side of things that we'll get to in a minute, with wrong parts call-outs and dents in the photo etch from a staple and this sort of thing. Overall, it's an okay kit, and if we didn't have the Ryefield Models kit, this is a good budget alternative for this particular T34. However, there are issues going through this. Now, we've got the lower hull all together there, and you saw how we put the springs in, which was it all looks pretty good, to be honest. And we've got these two-piece wheels, which just join in as you would expect. It's got that kind of Christie suspension vibe to it, so it looks a bit like the way the cruiser tanks, the British cruiser tanks are made up, because it's all using the same idea, the same type of suspension, but it's all unique to each country because they've obviously developed their own from the original Christie design. And just getting rid of the seam line there. We've got the idler and the sprocket as well. The sprocket is a sprocket, but it's not a toothed sprocket. It guides the track tooth as opposed to locking into holes as a sprocket would, and that's what this is here. The teeth go in between those circular bits in the middle, and that's how it locks in and powers it. And then we've got the idler is at the front, so this is a rear drive. So transmissions at the back. So it's quite good. So now we get onto the tracks. This is the first point. This is link and length tracks for a T34, and you think, well, this is great, brilliant, and it's got the track sag built into it, and it's reasonably good details I'm showing you here. When we flip it on the other side, we've got ejector pin marks both sides on every other track link. That's an absolute pain. These holes I've drilled out. They weren't there. So you see on this track here, on the tracks with the teeth, without the tooth, they've got two holes. So I've drilled all of those out. because they're meant to drill right through. And then I've used super glue here to fill the ejector pin marks. And then that's obviously then gets sanded back, which is a real pain. It's a lot of effort. I think you've got to do it because you're going to see these. The way the wheels are designed, there's not enough wheels to hide this. But it's a real pain. Why there has to be ejector pin marks like that in these days, I'm not so sure. Because other companies are doing it without. Tamiya are terrible for this as well, and I think they've really got to start looking at this as the as we get into the future of kits, because we're going to get turned on to other manufacturers that don't have these problems, I think, if it keeps going on. But needless to say, so the super glue's there, and I just sand them all back. That does create a noticeable step in the middle, so I do just sand through there now in the middle of the tracks, in between the toothed tracks is what I'm saying here. So I just sand that in. Just rechecking here any ejector pin marks that are still showing, and because they're recessed they need to be filled, so just going back in with the super glue, and just showing you here as well me drilling out those holes as I mentioned. And these holes were used to fix the ice cleats, so that's on every other track. So if they wanted to put ice cleats on, they'd stick the ice cleat on top of this and then put a bolt through it, screw it off, and that's how you got your ice cleats onto these tracks, to give you a bit more bite in very cold wintry conditions. We've also got seam lines running down the side of the tracks as well, which does show, so it does have to go if you want to do things right. So I'm scraping that away, and then if you do that, you can just melt that any of that excess away with Tamiya Extra Thin, and it just kind of disappears then. So you can see we're pretty good. So this is where I think I just go between the toothed tracks and sand that out now, just to blend it in, because all these sorts of things do show up. So this is my second Academy kit. We did the 35T. I'm starting and midway through another Academy kit, and not a lot's changed. It's still a real mixed bag, so I'm hoping things will get better as we go forward, but we'll have to wait and see. So far, they're not my favourite company. Again, you can just see there drilling out on this, drilling out those holes again, which is effective. You could say this will all get lost with mud, but we do make this one muddy, and it doesn't get lost. It does still show up. So as we get into the next step, you'll see this is what I'm talking about with the instructions. We've got an image here showing you to fill the inside of the part and drill the outside of the part, which, well, it's not actually even saying drill, it's saying cut off these bolts and fill the holes inside, which doesn't make any sense. What it should say is cut these bolts off in these specific places and drill through with a 0.8mm drill to create the hole. But it doesn't say that, and it's extremely confusing, and I was looking at this for ages and using reference to work out what on earth was meant to be going on here. But this is what they want you to do. They want you to drill through like that, through those 3 holes on each side, and that's to take the what is it to take? It's to take the fuel drums at the back. So this is the one with the extra drums. On the machine gun mount there as well, we've got that cast texture, so I just need to get rid of that again. You may wonder why I'm doing that on these smaller bits. Wait until you see the turret, and then you'll realise just how heavy the cast texture is. And it did get as heavy as that in places. I've seen reference where that is the case, but that's not what I wanted for this model, so we tone it down a bit. So I wanted to add a bit more refinement to some of these smaller parts on the front here. So I'm first filling the holes that the plastic parts were meant to go into. You can see on the left where I've actually done the detail. And what it consists of is this is kind of a sprung lock for when you put something over the tow hook at the front. So I wanted to cut this out using the reference. That's just a block of plastic. What it's actually meant to be is cut out like this and have a metal handle, and that's where the spring is, and it springs away. So that's what I've tried to represent here. And it was simple enough. You don't have to do this, obviously, but I'm just showing you small upgrades that we can do using kit parts or plastic card. And again, we've got this bit as well, which I think was for putting a block of wood in, but I may be wrong. I did find out, and it's been such a long time now, I'm editing this in the aftermath, I can't remember what it was for, but these the bits I'm using here with plasticard, which is upright, 2 upright pieces of metal. I thought it was something to do with that. I can't remember now. But if you do know, please let me know in the comments below. So there you see with the Plasto, which I do like using actually. It's quite a good filler for this sort of thing. It dries fast and it's quite good. So now I'm gluing that on in the same position with the extra fin, and you can see on the left hand side where I've put the piece of wire to represent the handle, and then we've got the tow hook, I guess. I can't think what else we'd call it. So I thought I'd show here as well. This is something you can use. It is quite expensive. I think with the wire and the tool, I think the tool was about £20, £25, something like that. With all the wire, it came to about £40. But this is a tool for making wire handles. It's RP tools, so you've got different settings where you can bend it around. So he makes his own copper wire, so you can buy RP's copper wire, and then you can buy the tool, and you measure it against the kit part, and then you just bend the wire around. And it's quite useful for this model because we do add quite a lot of grab handles from the copper wire. So just filling in the holes now, basically, on the rear section, and showing you where those go. So these are the mounts for the fuel drums that go on the rear. So we've also got the fuel drums. Now, looking at the reference, don't be too worried about any seam lines, because the actual fuel drums do have a seam line running along where this seam line is. They just welded them together and didn't care, it didn't matter, so they didn't sand it down. So it's actually more realistic to leave a seam line running horizontally along these barrels. Which is quite an interesting point. It's it all adds the detail, just like adding cast textures and weld details. You also got to know when there should be certainly faint lines and that sort of thing. But that wouldn't be over the straps. So what I do here is when the glue's dried, I sand the straps smooth, but I leave the line across the drum. Now you can see where I said we've made up some of the grab handles. So these were for infantry riders, so tank riders, which was the thing the Soviets were doing at this point later on in the war. They'd ride into battle with infantry hanging off them as well, and it was a way of having a quick attack. Not sure what it was like for the guys sat on the tank. And here again we're using the RP tools bender. I can't remember what it's actually called now, but it's a useful tool. I'm glad I got it. It's simply, you undo that black screw and slide the wire in where you want it, screw it down, that clamps it, then you bend it. And I found if you want a sharp bend, you need to push that in with a flat piece of metal against the tool. And there you see I'm just trimming it down now to the size I want, and then we offer it up to the side of the hole, and it starts playing silly buggers, as they often do, especially when super glue's involved. But just showing you that's the spacing, and then this is the ones I've added. They're not all perfect, and this isn't the tool's fault. This is me trying to learn the tool. This is actually the first time I've used this tool. So they're a little bit uneven, more so than I would like, but it's okay. Now these are quite thick bars in real life, so I'm not sure any would get dented easily. We've got these moulded on clasps as well, and these are for straps to hold in those ice cleats, which do get included. So we're going to get rid of all of those and add those again with bits of wire, and then loop the actual ice cleats on using Tamiya extra fin. Just showing you there where I've got to drill up some holes as well for the other fuel tanks that go along the back of the vehicle. So this is just showing you here, I actually used the wrong thickness of wire for these, for the area where the ice cleats are going to go. So I changed this, and that's what this little sequence is about. So I'm using, I think, 0.5 copper wire, which I was using for the grab handles. But what this really wanted was 0.3. It's a lot finer. and you'll see that in a minute. So again, just showing you how it's very useful, even with this tiny size of wire. It still gives really good finishes, and it being copper wire, it's very, very malleable. You can even flatten the end as well if you've got a good pair of pliers, and it will give like a flattened end to the handle as well. So there we go, quite small, and there they all are done in the wrong size. So we do redo these. I have kept these because I'm sure they'll come in handy somewhere. But I'm just showing you there. This is where I got it from, Hysterex Agents, and it's 0.3 copper wire, which is a lot better. And now you can see the difference in size. There's no comparison. So we've carried on with the 0.3. And to get those off, I'm just using my nippers. I find are very useful for this because they're anvil type, so we've got a flat edge. So you can get into these places easier than a knife would. That's my view of it anyway. And once they're all scraped away, cut off, whatever you would do, then you just sand it flush, and then you can add the wire back in. It's always good to keep everything nice and smooth if you can. So T34s, renowned for their cast texture. A lot of the Russian armour renowned for being very rough and ready. But of course the T34 sloped armour is rolled steel, so it shouldn't have cast texture on it. And in fact, the only thing that's got cast texture on this is any parts that are separate, like doors and cast bits that are put on, even the cupola mount and the turret. So it is surprising. People often go to town with adding cast texture, but you got to know where to put it. So what I was showing you there, you may have blinked and you may have missed it, is the covers. So you see it again. You've got a cover with a moulded in mesh screen, which doesn't fit because of these wires that go up and under, and I've cut out a little notch on the one I'm using, which you can see there. This is not shown in the instructions at all. So that little notch is actually in the reference. They did that. They cut it out for those wires to go up and under. So why it's not mentioned and why it's not cut out of the part, I have no idea. But it's just saying that the wires go under, but you'll never get it to fit. And there I'm just showing you the ice cleat. A little bit out of sequence, but that's because that's the bit we've just been doing there. So that shows why it is what it is. And we've got some spare track links as well, which go on here. Now we've got the driver's door. This is a cast piece, so this will get cast texture. I just noticed you had these raised areas, which I'm now recessing because that's what it seemed to be in the reference. The reference is from Prime Portal, just so you know. So it's a great website. Always check out Prime Portal for walkarounds. Just looking at their T3485. So now we're going to put on the mesh screens, and straight away you can see the dent in the photo etch from where the bag was stapled by Airfix. So that's not good. This is a piece of photo etch that's branded by Airfix. So you'd think if they've gone to that trouble, they would get the numbering right, but they don't. So in the instructions, they call out for PE2, PE1, PE3 and PE4. But although those parts are on this PE fret, in the instructions, they're all referring to the wrong thing. And PE2 is actually meant to be PE3. PE3 is meant to be PE4. And PE2 is the horizontal long strips. So what you've got here is you've got this piece here, which is photo etch, is part number 1 on this photo etch fret. They call it PE, and then the number. This needs to be rolled and domed, which it doesn't show you how to do in the instructions. And this is, you could anneal it, but it's not enough really. You just, with a paintbrush, you can roll it enough just to get a curve on it, and then the super glue will glue it down. So you glue that mesh screen on first. Once you've got a slight roll to it, you can then offer it up to the recess section, and you just add some super glue in the corners, and that will just clamp it down. So once you've got that bit glued on, then you need to go to the rest of the fret, and you've got these longer pieces, which is PE2, which you can see one's bent there at the front, at the top, sorry. So those now get stuck onto the top, and then you've got these other straps, which is PE3 and PE4, which go on the sides and then through the middle. So that's what they get wrong. So what I've gluing on here is the second PE2 bit, which is very, very tricky, to be honest. Why this couldn't have all just been done as one piece of photo etch, I don't know. I'm sure it must have been able to be done like that. But there you go. Even though Airfix have rebranded this, obviously this is Academy's doing, so Airfix have just put their stamp on it. But, you know, they should have spent the time to get the instructions right. Surely someone must have built this to check. I mean, wait till we get to the tracks in the second part. They don't fit. They're either too long or too short. I mean, surely someone must have built this, and they've either decided that that's fine, or they don't care. I don't understand it. But anyway, we're concentrating on this photo etch at the minute. You can sound that it's not been my favourite kit. So now we've got PE3, which are the edge pieces. I'm trying to show you here. I know this seems a bit in depth here. I'm sure you will be following. PE4 is now the 4 pieces that go along the centre here. They're these strips I'm offering up here. So if you are building this kit, or you don't know what on earth's going on when you get to this point, that should help you. But I understand it might not be great to watch, but I'm just showing you the cock-up that Airfix have done here. I can't say whether Academy have done this, because I haven't got the Academy instructions in front of me. Presumably they make the same mistake, but I don't know. But certainly Airfix haven't corrected it, which they should. There's also another bit as well that I've marked here in the instructions, is L14, which is the mount for the machine gun in the front next to the driver's hatch. That's called L14, and in the instructions it's just shown, there's no part number. So again, they don't make your life any easier. I've kept the instructions, even though the box is long gone, to point these things out. So I thought it was important. And I'm just, you know, there's not many words for it. Anyway, we got the mesh screen on, and now it's time to start offering up the top hole to the lower hole. And now you can see that the fit is very good, I must admit. Now there's some gaps at the back, which I was really worried about, but I made the point of going and checking the reference to show you that this is correct. So I've got this fender here, this mudguard that goes on. You see these raised sections where the rear part goes in around that fender. So I'll take it away in a moment. There we go. You can see it's not flush anywhere where I've got the cocktail sticks. You've got it going up around there and up around here. It's not flush and there's a gap. That's all correct. That's exactly what they look like. Unbelievably, but that is correct. You can see the step in the plate there, and I think it's because this rear, that rear deck is an actual hatch, and it will open up. So I think that's why it's like a door. So now we're on to the turret. So you get 2 options in this to do a post-war turret, as they've got it labelled, and a World War II turret. So you've got 2 types of turret. And it really boils down to having the larger cupola, which is a single door. What have we got? So what they list out for the factory 112 production is World War II has the ZIS S53 gun, small commander's cupola, 2-piece hatch, and a rear ventilator. Then they've got the Korean War one, as they call it, even though you don't get that option, is the same gun, but a large commander's cupola, and a 1-piece hatch and front and rear ventilator. Now the model I'm depicting is from the invasion of Manchuria in August 1945 that the Soviets did. And they swept down and started, basically pushed the Japanese out of Manchuria at the end of the war. There's a lot that goes into it, but I think it's basically to stake a claim in that side of things as well before it was all finished off. So what I need, looking at photos, is I need as far as Academy have got it listed, I need the World War I turret, but I need the Korean War, as they call it, cupola. And to make that fit, it doesn't. So I've had to cut it off, and as you can see there, it does now fit because it's got a smaller cupola. So I've cut that raised ring off, which it slots into as a kind of weld bead, I guess, moulded on. So I've just got to place that now in line. Now we've got the, you will have seen as well, the really heavy cast texture that was all over the turret, which I've got to be honest, I thought it was ridiculous, but actually looking at some references, some of these cast turrets are worse than that. So there is a area where it could be correct, but it's not what I wanted. I wanted it a lot less than that. So I'm just blasting through this with a very heavy sanding stick. I mean coarse, to really blast through it. It's the Blue Core Flory sanding stick, if you really want to know. I just really just try and retain the shape, but blast through all of that raised detail and smooth it off. And then we're going to add it all back in, so it's no problem. It's going to look it's going to look better, and it does look very good. I'm very pleased with how it comes out. Then this is a simple thing to do. You won't need to do this if you get the Ryefield Models kit, because the moulded on cast texture is just brilliant. But if you want to do this, some models you'll get don't have any texture, so you need to add it anyway. And what we're going to do here is add a whole load of details, just for argument's sake and artistic license. The Manchurian vehicles, I couldn't find any real photos of, certainly any 112 production vehicles, so I've basically just gone as I wish. I've just done what I like. So I saw some casting numbers. So what I showed you there was bits of the sprue with numbers on it, and you slice them off and letters, and then you glue them on like that, and it looks really good. Gives a nice touch of detail. And then you put your cast texture all over that, you stipple all over that, and it just adds a bit of a feature on the back. And it was literally copying the one that was on Prime Portal, so that's obviously definitely not correct, but well, accurate, should we say, but we're not worried about that so much. Now I'm adding in this iconic weld bead that goes along the side. It's not a weld bead, actually, it's a casting mark. I keep saying weld bead. It's a casting mark from where the sand mould is taken apart. So the turret is cast in one piece, but as the sand mould joins, you get a seam line, just like you do in a model kit, and that's what we're doing here. It's a casting line. This is left over from the casting process. So that's with stretch sprue, just melting it in there with Tamiya extra thin. We can be a bit messy, it doesn't matter. And then we're starting to add some of that cast texture back in. So we've got that machine guns mount. We've got the driver's door hatch. So we've gone all over that, stippling it in the same way that you'll see in a moment. And you leave all these parts off. Obviously the cupola as well. And the vents. The ventilators, sorry, they get it as well, and then we go all over the side of the turret. So just using Mr. Surfacer 1200, that's my preferred method, and a small brush, not a big brush, and just doing a bit at a time, just working around. We just stipple it on first, then we let it kind of go off a bit, and then we stipple it again, and that's when you get the actual texture. Initially, you're just putting the Mr. Surfacer on. Once it's actually on there, then that's when you then manipulate it to get the texture out of it. And it's a good technique. It's very easy. It's extremely rewarding. Very, very effective. A little bit monotonous. A little bit smelly. You might want to do it in stages, and you can. It's so quick because it's kind of cellulose based. It just vents off very quick, and it's dry in about an hour. You can sand it back if it's too heavy. You can sand it right off if you don't want it, or you could wipe it off with cellulose based thinners and start again. You can manipulate this at any point by using more Mr. Surfacer over it, and it will just melt back through it. When you're happy, then you paint it and on you go. You see now that we've put it on, and then we've stippled back and forth, and now we're getting that texture. There's a little bit of the texture underneath that we've sanded off, not completely gone, that's working to our favour as well, some of the pitting. And there you see, that is how it will dry, just like that. It's perfect. So this is, I did that the evening before, and now we're on to The next side, as I come back, you can see the casting numbers there as well. This is quite sped up, so it only shows when I start moving, but it's quite a long sequence this, and I thought, you know, even sped up it can be a bit of a trial to watch, so we don't lose anything by doing this. And there you can see, just being careful going around the top edge, because we've got a weld bead that we want to keep along there. We don't want to get too muddled into that. We just want to keep it on the flat surfaces and going underneath as well, whereas, as you can see, to the base of the turret where it connects to the hull. And you know, you can see when you start to fill it in, you can then go back and manipulate that as it starts to dry off, and you just do it in sections as you go back through. It's very tempting to want to go all the way back across, but you know, just doing this front section now, and then we go back and we bring the texture in and make sure it's there, and then load up and go back from the other section, and eventually when it joins up, it gives you the effect, and then the turret's done. And as I say, there's not much more that needs to be done here. It's a surprisingly small amount when you consider just, you know, the thought process behind everything's got cast texture, and you know, Soviet tanks are very heavy in the way they're produced, and you know, they are, and they can be, but they can also be quite smooth, and they got anywhere in between. It just depends on the factory, how it's been done, what's happening at the time, whether they're nearly being overrun or whether they got all the time in the world. It just changed how things were being done. I also add some texture across the metal parts as well. It's almost as a kind of primer, I guess. I'm not trying to add texture. I'm just painting this surfacer on it, because paint flakes off of metal surfaces very easily. It's a bit overexposed there, but I'll get the lighting right in a minute, and you can hopefully see how everything's looking. No, I'm really quite pleased with it. I think the cast bead as well, the seam line there, is really effective. We've got the mantlet on now and the gun in, all very straightforward, no problem at all. And we've got the kind of like cover that goes over the top, which is just sheet metal, so that's not got the cast texture on. This is why you leave it off, because it's very hard to get in and around there once it's glued on. I'm just showing you the gun barrel. It's a very impressive gun, if I do say so myself. It's you know, they knew what they were doing. It's a bit of a monster. You wouldn't want to have this coming around the corner, would you? Even if you are in you know, your Tiger or whatever, I think it's still sort of big cause for concern. So now the cupola goes on and that finishes it off. We've got the door open. My intention was to add a whole load of tank riders to this, but I was a bit burned by buying a set and none of them fitted. So I'm just going to use the tank commander, but we'll come back to that at a later date. We're going to finish this model off in the next video, which is next week, and we may well return to this later on to maybe do a bit of a scene or something. So this really brings this part to an end. I've got a few pictures coming up at the end just to show some detailed shots of what was done, because again, it looks like the model's complete, but it's all in stages, so it doesn't look much. And it kind of finishes off the video by showing you this. The last thing I'm going to do is actually thin these mud guards down, because they do show up quite a bit, and it pays off, and that's just by scraping. So with a blade, just scraping the plastic away until it flattens down and gets nice and thin at the edge, and then you can manipulate it and you can bend it, and there's one glued on, just with a bit of bending here and there where the plastic's a bit thinner, and it starts to look pretty good. So this is all part of what we've been doing all the way along. This is the beginner's guide to armor modeling, so it's all part of a playlist. So do, you know, save that playlist if you haven't already, and stay tuned, because there's a lot going on. Here you can see the difference between the kit turret and my texture. As I say, we'll be finishing off this model with the painting next week, so if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving the video a like, let me know any comments down below. If you want to support the channel, there's links in the description below where you can do that. We've got Patreon campaign and PayPal link, and you can even join the channel. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.